Let's chat.
It's hard.
You want to talk?
I know, that's
Sit
disappointing.
back. Let's work this
How's
out.
it going? What are we doing here? Where are you going? Hey there. Wow.
It's not always easy.
It's amazing if you think about it.
Let's think
This
about
seems
this.
strange. I have some thoughts about that. Life is hard.
Trauma bonded.
Who in the world hates lesbians?
Probably Christians, fascists,
Mm-hmm.
most religions, actually.
Yes. A lot of Republicans,
Yeah.
right?
I said fascists.
Wow. Okay. And also, according to our storyteller, activists and people in the civil rights movement.
Well, is that...
No, I'm just saying it was confusing to me that she was like way into, changing the world, save the world, way into the women's movement, into debate, all these things. And then she's like, oh my God, I might be a lesbian. And it was like the worst thing to be ever.
Right.
I was like, but I thought...
Yeah. I know. Welcome to Trauma Bonded. I'm Elly Westberg here with Therese Garcia. And today we're discussing the rebroadcast of, this is actually happening, episode 148, What If You Killed Someone? A successful activist woman who has always been a do-gooder accidentally kills someone on her drive home in a car crash. And full disclosure, I am the showrunner for This Is Actually Happening, and I have the privilege to vet stories and conduct pre-interviews before they go to Whit for the final interview. And T knows nothing about anything. She comes in fresh. This show, Trauma/Bonded, is for the listeners. A space where we can talk about each episode, digest it, and reflect on it with empathy and also a little bit of levity. T, what did you think the heart of Shane's story was?
I have a couple. The first being something we've talked about a lot in the past, about how life can really change in an instant. And a lot of times just happens to us, right? Could be an accident, something you just don't have control over necessarily. And then thinking about those things can make you feel a little bit crazy and like you never want to leave your house or something. But you got to go past that. But just to cherish life, right? As best you can, as much as you can. Live your life as much as you can. My second heart of the story, and totally agree with Shane on this, that cars are death machines. And really something I took away from it was like, unfortunately, to be vigilant and more careful all the time as you drive,
Yeah.
It's not really a heart.
I think that's a big part of her story, though, and I think that's a message that she's always communicating with. I mean, we can talk about death and all of that, and big existential ideas or philosophical ideas, but at the heart of her story, I think her message is be wary of cars.
Yeah.
They're not just sexy, they're not just utilitarian. They can kill, and it can happen in an instant. And I definitely felt, I think it's a reminder that we all need to have from time to time. I think that we can get really complacent, especially the longer we've been driving. And I think it's important to also keep in mind that other people maybe aren't being vigilant, so we need to drive defensively. I'm a big believer in that. I'm always watching out for what other cars might be doing on the road and reacting accordingly. And not to talk about myself, but I am so annoyingly vigilant on the road that I'm kind of really difficult to be a passenger for a lot of people. And it's probably the one thing that Scott and I fight over the most. So it's almost got to the point where we cannot ride in the car together if he's driving. Like, I will lose it. But he's come a long way. I love you, honey.
You're a great passenger in my car because I try to be as safe as possible.
You're a safe, vigilant, defensive driver, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I also have several hearts of Shane's story. I think that, she talks about this quite a bit, that she'll always be sort of set apart from the human race in her mind, that there was her before this accident and definitely her after, and she's lived through something and dealt with something that maybe a lot of us never will, and that makes her feel set apart. 2, that death is close at hand. 3, that the personal is the political, which she says early on in her story, and I take that also to mean sort of the personal is the universal in being vulnerable and sharing the details of her story. She understands that it can move people to change. 4, cars are death machines.
We had the same one.
Yeah. And I think this is an important one too. 5, and this is where her story becomes more of like a tale of warning, is just as we fear we might lose our life in a car crash, we need to be more vigilant to ensure that we don't cause the loss of life in a car crash. When I started driving, every time I drove a friend somewhere, my mom would always say to me, drive safe and take care because you're responsible for the lives of the people in your car. Of course, also the people around us, but definitely the ones inside. And so I think that's a healthy point of view to have when you're driving.
Oh, yeah, it's good to be conscious of that. Though I will say my parents would never drive any of their friends around ever.
Just for the fear of liability?
I guess. It was the weirdest thing. Like, I had to really push to drive my friends around after I got my license. And they were finally like okay with it, but for themselves, they're like never.
Do they have a bad car crash in their history? Either one of them?
No.
And that's not like a cultural thing or something?
I don't think so. Like, Filipinos in their jeepneys and there's like 100 people in there. I don't know.
Well, I really have to say, like, Shane, her whole life is just a marvel. I mean, what this woman has been through. It's sort of heartbreaking to think that she put off college hoping to find out that she's not a lesbian. I mean, to have that realization that you might be gay and to think, okay, well, how am I going to work with this gayness as a university student? That was so serious to her that she actually delayed it, hoping that the lesbianism would wear off or something like that.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, right. But she had to learn that for herself. And
yeah.
Whoa.
I also had to learn that myself as well. It took me years and years.
Well, did you feel like you had a point where you thought you could get rid of it?
Many years of that. Like decade kind of thing. And then I thought, when I really came out, I thought, I get it. I just love people. But no, I don't love people.
You do.
I do. I mean, I don't make
You don't
love
want to make
with
love
people.
with everybody. You just
Not
want
with
to make
everybody.
love with...
The ladies.
Yes. I mean, I know you said that you felt gay feelings as early as 5 years old.
Came out when I was 5.
Yeah.
And then I went right back in till I was 19. But I was in there being like, get that gay out of there for 14 years.
And then when did you feel comfortable to really come out and be yourself?
When I was 20, I came out. But that was when I said I love people. I just love this one lady. And then it wasn't until probably after we broke up, when I was like 23, when I was like, I'm not looking for dudes at this point, So 23 was when I was like owning the lesbianism.
I thought it was interesting the way Shane talked about how she came out to her family. And then she mentions like having to live in her car, and it made me wonder, like, was she not accepted as being gay? I felt like that transition was strange.
Yeah.
Or did they reject her in some way for not going to college right away? Her coming from the seemingly like socially aware, progressive, it seems like family, middle class, it seems like they would have, supported her. Did you think that was odd?
Yeah, I didn't know why she had to live in
Yeah.
a car. Couldn't she just live with her
Yeah, I
parents?
just wonder if there was an acceptance issue, or maybe
Yeah.
it was just a pride issue. She thought, if I'm not gonna go to school, I'm gonna take care of myself no matter what it takes. And working in the trades.
That's a
at
lot.
In this decade,
Laying asphalt.
with all men, I mean, what a wicked experience.
She's getting hit with chains.
Yeah,
You fell at a restaurant one time. You
I
quit
quit the next day.
You know?
Yeah, or I quit that night. Yeah.
But she's getting hit. Yeah. But she's getting left and right. They're harassing her. But yeah, the physical bit, like, that's dangerous.
It really was. And I think it's just such a testament to how amazing she is, that she not only was able to be accepted, but she used that position to learn a lot about men's lives, and two, to sort of affect change around her. They stopped catcalling because she was able to express how it felt to be a woman and get catcalled. It's like really empathy in action. It's quite remarkable. And it shows how profound that was for her, because when she did finally go to college, she, said she couldn't sit in a room and hear people talk about working class consciousness. It felt empty. And I love it that she transitioned that into the understanding that to change violent men, you have to work with them.
Yeah. She could have written them off completely, right? Just come into work, do her thing, get harassed, get hit a couple times.
Yeah.
But she was like, there's something else here. These are actual people and they have stories. And she was actually able to like bond with them. Yeah, and change them. Way better than, in a classroom reading books about the working class.
And that just makes me think about like politics today. And I think that it is really important that when we talk about toxic masculinity or feminism or anything like that, that we always should be including men in that conversation, because you cannot have progress on one side without the other. And just as much as women are often downgraded or degraded, men are facing circumstances too. Feminism truly is about equality, and I really think that it's important that we hear men's stories as well, so that there can be true equality. Men are up against it.
No, I agree.
They really are. I could not
yeah.
imagine having to deal with the pressures and the messages they're getting all the time.
All the time.
There's this whole be an alpha male.
Yep. Bringing up two boys in the house. There's all these things around being tough and not feeling like you can cry. And all of us have emotions. Yeah. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the crash.
Yeah, and she refuses to call it an accident.
Why do you think that she makes sure to make that distinction when she talks about it?
I think she wants to make sure it's clear that she was responsible for it, even though it wasn't on purpose.
But it can still be an accident. Yeah. I mean, I want to honor what she wants to call it, of course, but imagine those feelings after you've kind of realized what's happened, right? Her first thought is, I am a killer. And she knows that life will never be the same, and that she can't believe this just happened. I mean, to sit there with those feelings, and then you still have to deal with the practicalities of finding him, finding out how grievous his injuries are, discovering that he is, in fact, deceased. To deal with all of that in this short amount of time, so hard to get the police on the phone, all that. And then to have this police officer make this terrible joke.
Yeah, it seemed bad timing.
I mean, comedy is tragedy plus time. This just happened. She's not ready to have a sense of humor about it. He probably really just stuck his foot in it. I doubt he was actually trying to make a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, we all sometimes make jokes in situations where we don't mean to, or maybe because we're nervous or uncomfortable. Or, you know, it could also be due to the fact that he has seen a lot of death and a lot of accidents and a lot of like bad shit. And so he kind of compartmentalizes a lot of it and can't really be with her in that moment in the way that she needs him to be. And she's clear that she doesn't blame her or anything. But for her, I think it's fascinating that, of course, she fixated on that. Like, I'm not ready to joke about this. She's to move from the heaviness of what's occurred in her experience to then trying to filter in a joke. It would feel really difficult to be able to do. What did you think about when she was talking about how she felt like the person that she killed and her were in it together? Like it was only he, she says only he and I had been on that road.
It's like they have this eternal connection that only they experienced. Of course, their perspectives are completely different.
But it's sort of like a symbiotic relationship of sorts. It's a tragic one, but it's the dead and the killer.
It's powerful. And she did try to, you know, connect with the fam or understand, you know, more of his background. But it just didn't feel like she could go and talk with his fam.
I think it's hard to know. Because she's right. It's
totally hard to
either
know.
they've accepted this as a part of life and they might encourage her connection, because it is a very intimate connection that she had with their son, their brother. But it could also be, like she mentioned, like some people that have lost ones in car crashes want nothing to do with the driver. So how would she ever find that out? She might not ever know. It seems to me like her only solution is to stand by, and if they come to her in whatever way that they need healing, whether it's to hold her responsible and yell at her or to ask her questions or whatever it is, I mean, that's all that she can do, is just hold that space for them and hope that if they need her, if that would bring them peace in some way, that they could come to her. But yeah, I don't think she can ever go to them.
Well said, Elly.
You know, there's this couple times where it feels like she's holding two feelings at once, right? She has that feeling that if she did go to prison, it's okay, because she maybe collectively in her life, she's done enough bad to justify prison, and she doesn't deserve a good life because she's just killed someone. But then she waffles and, you know, also can hold the feeling that, but she's just a 41-year-old woman, really still in the prime of her life, and she's an educator, and she has a partner, and she has a son that she loves. Like, she shouldn't go to prison, right? She's holding these two feelings at once. And just like, I think there's also two feelings like kind of held by people that might judge the situation. There was her cabin landlord who said to her, how could you not see him? You know, whereas his wife picks her up and says, I'm so sorry. It's like there's two ways to judge this situation.
I just imagine Highway 1 at night. It's not easy to see.
Yeah, you guys, if you don't know, it's super windy. It's super dark.
It's
dark,
dark.
dark.
There's cliffs. It's not like there's not a lot of people walking.
It's not a place where you'd walk
on Highway
right.
1.
It's definitely not a place where you'd cross the street. There's no crosswalks. There's no stoplights. It's just this high in a mountain range, windy road, the ocean right next to you, and cliffs on the other side. And you would not expect to see a person out there. The people that are out there, they might pull over in like a little interchange where it's like a vista point where you get out to view.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
And that is a curiosity, like what was he doing out there in the middle of the night, and why was he trying to cross that moment? What about her partner's driving phobia that she'd had all her life? And she called it, Shane referred to it as spooky. It definitely is spooky.
It is spooky.
It feels like a foreboding. She didn't smile until July the next year. That's, wow. That is a heaviness to carry with you. When she speaks, she sees everything and everything, right? She talks about getting that same car back, the death car. And she went through this spell of bleeding really heavily, and she said she would bleed in that car the way he bled from that car. Like, to put these things together and say them out loud, god damn, it's so profound. And it's
powerful.
And it was almost like it was the only way that she could deal with having this car back. You know, sometimes because of finances or whatever, we have to keep driving the car that we killed someone with, you know, but for her to sit with it and almost accept that she's having this bleeding issue as a form of empathy, or that's what happens in that car, and she just has to deal with it.
It's almost like everything that happens from now on, everything is symbolic and means something, and it's always going to be connected to that one moment. So.
I don't know how it could not. And I think that she does honor his life by almost making the whole rest of her life about him, honoring him, about writing about this and in a way, and changing people and making people more aware of the dangers of cars and the road. And she truly is completely changed from this crash. So she talks about sort of the power of talking this out with this man David, and really sometimes just talking it out with someone wise can make a difference. It's that, again, shining that light in a dark place. And she says that brought her back. And she talks about this book by Pema Chodron, The Wisdom of No Escape. Have you read that book? No.
No, have you?
I should. I feel like I should. I looked it up, though, and it's the basics of it, if people aren't familiar, is that you can only experience real joy when you stop running from pain. And that you have to embrace, again, two sides of every coin. You have to embrace happiness and suffering. You have to embrace intelligence and confusion. These are natural parts of life. And, you know, it just sounds like through these things, she started to come back little by little. And then she talks of sort of like the residual aftermath of it, like she can sense a car crash coming in media and TV and movies. And again, she recognizes the way that that's used in storytelling. It's a sudden plot shift, and it's a sudden death, and just as it changes the course of a story in a film or a TV show, of course it does it too in her own life, right? She can see that so clearly. But she, you know, I think her end message is we need to talk about car crashes. people read her book and said, after I read your story, I drove home differently.
No, yeah. And I feel the same. I mean, listening to her story and just knowing, like you said, being complacent when you're driving. Or just
Distracted.
like being in like distracted or being in that subconscious state. Just like going, it's like, whoa, how did I get here? You know, you're just kind of driving. It's like, okay, I have my whole family in this car.
Right.
There are people that walk around and jaywalk, you know, just being aware.
Oh, how many of us have done that where you're driving, maybe it's a long distance or whatever, and you go and you kind of come back into yourself and you're like, oh my God, I wasn't really paying attention. You just kind of get in a zone. I think we've all done that.
I missed my exit.
Yeah.
And nowadays, like now you can talk on the phone.
Okay, so I have an older car. And so I don't have one of those like screens on the front, but when I rent a car or drive other people's cars, it always has a screen, and I find the screen woefully non-intuitive. I have no idea how it works. I've never really worked it out, but to me, it just seems like a big fat distraction because there's just so many options and buttons, and I think it's so wholly distracting. And maybe once I spent time in a car with it for a long period of time, I'd get more used to it and figure out how it worked and can quickly push a button without taking my eyes off the road for too long. But as a person, T, that drives newer cars, what do you think about that little screen?
Well, I find it very helpful, and in fact, I can just picture you in the car just like, hopefully at a stoplight, just like hitting it and yelling at it. I just want this to, and just so mad. It's like, yeah, I can see that. Oh, it's fine for me. I mean, I do see how it can be distracting, but they don't like play movies or anything on it. But my map is on there, so it's a bigger map. I can see where I'm going a little bit easier. Then I can change my music or change my podcast to the next one, or go to the. And then text messaging is nice. You just say it. You don't type. They try to make it like they take some safety measures. But if you're not familiar with it and all you're doing is hitting it and yelling at it, I'm sure that's not very safe. I'm not all up on it the whole time either.
But I think that's my point. Like, even with a Maps app, again, it's meant to be an assistance, but I think it can be a distraction. Or podcasts, like, I get excited when a podcast is like an hour because I know I don't have to worry about switching that to the next one or something like in the middle of a trip, because if I do have to, and some apps aren't as intuitive as others, I'm fully taking the phone and looking at it, touching it, and, you know, trying to set up the next episode. And I think it's completely distracting. When she says, am I allowed to remember him?
I think she's allowed. And I think it was also probably inevitable with how sensitive and how connected she is. You said, her mind just goes everywhere. I don't think she'll ever not think of him.
And she says she can't cast him out of her heart, which I think is really beautiful. And I think she does. She uses her whole life to honor him and what happened.
And ultimately, I think, in the end, she said she wanted a life that did more good than harm. She wanted to be a do-gooder, And it was so sad. She's like, oh, that ambition's just out the window now because of that moment. And the fact that, to me, the fact that she's trying and building up this awareness, and even things she did before, and like representing these people's stories and understanding other people's, perspectives and bringing that into the world. I mean, she's done a lot of good. She's probably saved some lives with how much she's been talking about this. I bet she saved a lot of lives. It'll always be with her, but I don't think she should put herself in that category of not being a do-gooder.
I agree. And she says we have so much less control than we think we do. And everything can change in an instant. And ain't that the truth? So be vigilant out there. Drive safe. Think of your responsibility to others on the road. Do you have anything else, Tia?
Just to continue on that, it's being hyper vigilant and knowing that, like, the choices we make, we're responsible for others as well.
If you look out for others, that's just going to make the world a better place for us all. I mean, that's a hell of a takeaway from this episode. Thank you for listening. This has been an episode of Trauma/Bonded. You can find our show where podcasts are kept. Please rate and review us on Apple and other places. Thank you to Shane for sharing their story and giving us the opportunity to talk about it. And thanks to the This Is Actually Happening team, including Whit, Missildine, and the maker of our music and website, Nathaniel Trimboli. And thank you to Cathy Sites for editing this episode. You can contact us at traumabondedpod@gmail.com and find us on Instagram at traumabondedofficial, or visit our website at traumabondedpod.com. We are trauma bonded to the story, to the storyteller, to the listeners, and to each other. Thank you for spending this time with us today. And thank you, T. I love you.
Thanks, Elly. Love ya. Good job. Hey, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Trauma bonded.